Hi everyone. Hope everyone is staying safe and keeping well. Okay, it's been a long while since I last did my last video, right? So today I'm going to try and do a quick tutorial to show you how to integrate QRadar Community Edition, the latest 7.3.3 with Cisco Secure Endpoint, formerly known as Cisco AMP for Endpoint. Hopefully this video will help those who needs to basically ingest the Cisco AMP for Endpoint logs into QRadar. I've been trying to get documentations video on this and found it a little bit challenging. So I thought I might as well make a video for those who need it. This video is split into two parts. Part 1, I'll show you how to download QRadar, how to install it on a EXSI server. For part 2, I'll show you how to configure QRadar and Cisco AMP for Endpoint for the logs to be ingested into QRadar. One of the key difference from a lot of the other logs like window logs through window collectors and syslog, for example, Cisco Endpoint, one of the way to ingest the log is through RabbitMQ and API. First, let's go to the website to download QRadar CE. You will see the latest version 7.3.3 on the website when you go in there, right? When you click on download, it will prompt you to log in. If you have not had an account, you can always register for one. Once you log in, you'll be brought to this page where you can download the OVA file. Once that is done, let us import QRadar into EXI. First, deploy a virtual machine from an OVF or OVA file. Give it a name, right? Any name will do here. Then next, after that, open the folder and copy in the ISO, OVF, and VMDK file. Click next, and then choose the location that you want to mount the image. For this demo, I'm going to choose thin provisioning, right? For production, it's always advised to do thick provisioning. It helps in the performance. Then proceed to click next. Do a quick review of the configurations. There's really nothing much you need to configure here right now. We can change the settings later. Click on finish and it will start the provisioning. Once that's done, we can start setting up QRadar. Launch the VM instance, right? By default, the user login name is root. When you key in root in the command prompt, the first time that you key in the username, you'll be prompted to basically create your new password. Enter in a secure password as usual, right? Uh, and then you'll be brought to the command prompt or the Linux prompt, right? First, let's take a look at the IP address. You will need this later on to access the browser interface. Remember this IP address as you will need it later. Enter the command /setup. You'll be prompted to access the license agreement, right? Read through the license agreement. If no concern, right, and then you can proceed, right? For me, I've read through this multiple times, so I'm going to type Q, exit the license agreement, and then you'll be prompted to continue, right? The version, as we can see here, is 7.3.3. Type yes, and then the installation starts. It takes about 20 minutes to install the whole thing in my environment. I'm going to fast forward this part, and yes, we are nearing the completions of the implementation. As you can see here, you'll be prompted to enter the admin password after you complete. This is the password that you'll be using to log in to the uh, web interface. Once you have done that, let's move over to the web interface, right? When you key in the IP address, you get a prompt that the certificate is not trusted, which is normal since we have not trusted the certificate on the browser yet, right? Click accept, enter in your admin and password, and yes, you're done with the QRadar installation. Okay, you'll be shown the license agreement again. Review through the license before you log in. Click on accept, and then you'll be brought to the first page of the QRadar CE edition. You might want to take the time to just quickly read through the community edition page, right? There are a few things that you can look at. You can watch the video, right? That gives you a quick introduction about the community edition. There are a few resources on this page that you'll be using throughout this implementation, right? Uh, First thing is, do a quick check uh, on the minimum requirement, right, that the CE provides. They give you 50 events per second and 5,000 net flows upfront, right? Anything beyond that, you probably need to buy the official QRadar version. This is the minimum requirement to run the community edition, right? 8 gig RAM, 250 gig hard disk, 2 cores, right? Take note of this, as in my next video, we'll look at how do you increase the RAM and change the memory allocation for the dashboards or for the apps. Okay, next, do read the documentation, right, to get started. Couple of things that you'll basically pick up from here. You know what are the base components that are being installed, and one of the key things to take note is also, if you need some of the packages that you do not see in the default install, there's an instruction on, by default there are some packages that are available in the ISO image already. So you can actually mount the ISO image, right, that was imported at the beginning of the video, right? Mount it into a media CD-ROM, go to the directory, look for the package, and then of course you can issue the yam command to install the RPM, right? Similar, if you are downloading the package from the web and then installing the packages, and then you need to deploy the changes and restart the web server as well. That's all for the part one of our tutorial, right? I will show you how to integrate the QRadar with Cisco Secure Endpoint. Remember to download the DSM configuration guide for the part two of our video. Now let's look at integrating Cisco Secure Endpoint or M for Endpoint with QRadar. If the link doesn't work, go to the search panel and look for the DSM guide, right? It will bring you to the online version of the DSM guide, and then you can search for Cisco M, and you will bring up the documentation for Cisco M DSM, right? Okay, there's a few things to take note over here. First, you need to install a couple of other RPM. By default, Cisco M DSM is not installed, and unfortunately is also not available in the ISO image. Okay, so let's move over to the IBM download page, right? Click on download, fix update and drivers, take a bit of time to load. Once you're in there, you select the QRadar version, right? And also the platform, right? To make it easy, you can select all platform, right? Click on continue. Then go to the text and search for keywords. In this case, Cisco M. Okay, select this package, DSM-Cisco M and the latest version, right? Okay, my session has timeout, right? So let me key in my username and password, and then we'll be able to download the RPA. Okay, once that's done, choose the method to download, click continue. They'll prompt you to save the file, and we've done downloading the packages for the Cisco M component. Okay, uh, I've also downloaded the rest of the component that are needed since I've done this before. So you'll see a couple of the DSM common, the protocol rabbit MQ in the download folder that I have. Okay, next, let's log on to the console of the QRadar Linux server. Okay, once we're in there, what I'm going to do is to create a folder called download in the temp directory so that I can quickly identify the file amongst all the other downloads I might have. Okay, I'm going to go to the download folder. It's empty. Okay, going to use the Secure FX transfer application that I always use for this demo, but you can use any Secure FTP client that you want. Drop the RPA package into the QRadar machine, and then we can go back to the QRadar command prompt, or the Linux prompt, and then execute the following command. If you cannot remember, like me, go back to the configuration guide. They will basically, if you remember, there's a command called yam install that we need to do. Next, we're going to install the DSM. Type in yam -y, and then of course not forgetting the install. And then let's take a look. Okay, we're seeing two errors. Okay, so if you remember the documentations, there are actually two other dependencies that we need to have. The DSM common, right? And also the Revit MQ protocol. It seems that both of them are outdated in the current OS or current QRadar image. Once you complete the download, let's fast forward and show you the installation for the DSM common, right, and the Rabbit MQ. They are actually pretty straightforward. We just want to basically check if there are any errors while we're doing this install. So far, it's been so good. Okay, now let's hop over to the dashboard. Okay, there's a few things we need to do. Go to the admin tab and we need to deploy the changes. Remember, in the manual, you actually need to deploy the changes and then restart the web service. Okay, so let's go and click on deploy changes on the top. Okay, but before that, let's just take a quick look at what are the packages that we have installed. Okay, and then it takes some time. I'm going to fast forward again. And there's one thing that I'm not sure anyone have noticed. We actually didn't deploy or didn't install the DSM for the Cisco M yet. So while I'm doing the recording and cutting of the video, I have basically shortened a whole chunk of the video, right, and skip right to installing the Cisco MDSM. And then, of course, we have to go through the entire process of deploying the CSM, AMP, DSM uh, component in the web browser again. Just want to let you know while we fast forward this, it's pretty much the same. Now that we are installing the packages, once this is done, we need to deploy the changes on the uh, QRadar console again, right? So once that is done, I'm going to show you how to configure the log source. Click on the log sources under data sources. Click add. Okay, look for the log source Cisco M. You see when you select Cisco M, the protocol configuration will have been changed to RabbitMQ. Right, next give it a name that you want to recognize the log source by. I'm going to put it as demo M, put it the description so that you know what you're collecting, right? Then give it a log source identifier, right? It will be helping you in your analysis later. Now, this part we will need to get to the next part of the configuration, which is to create a API key in Cisco Secure Endpoint. Also, at the same time, we need to create a event stream, right, for QRadar to collect the events from Cisco M. Now, let's take a look at the documentation again. Right, so let's look at how do we create a Cisco M for endpoint credential. The instructions are pretty clear. I'm going to show you the steps on the Cisco endpoint dashboard quickly. Once you log on into your Cisco Secure Endpoint dashboard, right, go to Account, click on API Credentials, then click on Add New API Credential. Right, over here, give it a name, right? One thing that I forgot to do during the recording was to basically enable both command line and API access to file repository. I'm going to fast forward to the part that I reconfigured that so you guys see the configuration. These are the two options that you need to enable. Enable command line and allow API access to file repository, download or date logs. Once you click create, a new API client ID and an API key is created. Save this somewhere because you'll be using this later for your creation of the event stream. Let's go back to the documentation and check out what are the commands that we are going to execute. What you are seeing here is the command to create a single event stream, which is what we're going to do in this demo, right? You can look at the syntax, right? Explanations are there in the highlighted areas. Effectively, what we're going to do is using the client ID and the API key that we have created uh, to basically launch a API request using post command to create an event stream, right? So that the data can be sent in to QRadar. Before we go to the actual command, do take note that we are using the APJC endpoint. So you need to change the commands to point to a api.apjc.m.cisco.com. You see, by default, it is actually only pointing to api.m. Okay, now what I'm going to do is to basically try and explain, right, how did I or how do I map the command, right, that you see on the documentation right, using curl to try and create an event stream, right? So for those of you who are curl expert, you know what it is, right? So in a nutshell, we're going to use curl, right, to basically um, send out a request as what minus x means, right? And a post command, right, to basically create a stream. So what you see here, the minus h, these are the header, right? So uh, the more common API calls today are based on JSON, right? But of course, there are other headers, other applications that you might be using curl to talk to. Therefore, the minus h is there, right? What you see here, the minus d is actually what is key, right? Is actually the data, right, that you want to send to the API, right? Through the API call, right, to denote what are the parameters that you want to basically retrieve or to change. For example, in our case, it's really to create, right? In this call, to create something using the API, right? Minus U is the user, right? So for a typical API call, you usually have your API client ID, which we've created earlier on, right? And a client ID, which is like a username, and API key, which is like a password. So it's super important that you protect those, um, you know, API credential, right? The client ID and API key. And of course, the last but not least is the target, right? So the target that you're going to basically get to talk to, right? You're going to call this API to the target. Okay, so what I've done, right, in this tutorial, right, the formats are very much the same, right? So we don't have to actually send the minus h header to tell the application what is the format that we're going to communicate in. Therefore, you do not see the minus h in my uh, shortened curl command, right? So effectively, what this post command that you see here does is similarly, right, a request, which is a post command to the target, which is this, right? So this is the target that is going to receive our API call, and the client ID, right, is basically the uh, client ID or the username that we have created, the client application ID we have created in the endpoint, and okay, and the password, which is the API key, is basically the secret key, right? Or the password that we have created earlier. Bear in mind there is a colon here, right? That basically separates the client ID and the key. So you do not have to, worry about this, lesser than sign, right? What I've put here is basically to just give you emphasize on the parameters that we're going to put in, right? So you do not have to put in this when you're keying this command, right? So that's all, right? For what I'm going to basically issue, right? So what this effectively does is it creates a event stream in which the logs are going to be collected and sent, right, to QRadar itself. After you launch the command, you will see that on your console, the results will be returned, right? So I've basically captured the results and rearrange it into a slightly better format so that I can explain this to you, right? So we've gone through the curl command, right? So you should be familiar with that right now. So the results that is returned is actually in a JSON format. So if you use an application such as Postman, you'll get actually a well-arranged results returned to you. Of course, on the Linux side, you can do something better, right, to get that. But that will be for another uh, tutorial. Okay, so what we need or one would need to know is basically a couple of things. We need to know the username, right? So I've actually changed this part of the username, so it's no longer a real username. And then we need the stream of the queue name, or the event stream name, right? And then we need the password, right? Likewise, this password is no longer true, right? And then the host, or the host IP, or the target that we need to talk to, and the ports of the uh, results that is returned, right? So this is basically what we need to you need to remember, right? The username, the password, uh, the event stream or the queue name, and then the host, and of course the port number, right? In this case, it's 443. It's pretty easy to remember. Okay, so that's pretty much what there is to the um, explanation of the results that is written, and we will move on to entering the data into the uh, log source. Now let's head back to the log source and start entering the parameters. Okay, so we put in the port, which is 443, uh, followed by the queue name. You can always look at the question mark to get more details of, the explanation of what do you need to enter. Or you can check back on my previous video on the mapping. Okay, we've keyed the stream. Next, we're gonna enter the username and password, and you need to confirm the password once again. Remember to select yes to automatically acquire the certificate from the server. It's important. If not, you will not be able to communicate later on. Once you completed the steps, remember to save, and you should see that a log source is created for the Cisco endpoint using the Rabbit MQSC protocol. Now, we need to remember to deploy these changes in QRadar. Most of the changes that you do, you actually have to deploy them. So let's go back to the admin page. We'll talk about the log source management and apps in another video, right? That will help you when you have more log sources coming in, right? Click on deploy changes, and now we're going to wait for the changes to be deployed. And I'm going to fast forward and cut and edit some of the video, right? As this part to completion is another 30 minutes to an hour. Now, if everything goes well, you should see the MQ being added with a status success. You might need to restart the web service, the collector services, right? And it might take a while before it becomes successful, right? So I've basically fast forward and edited the video, but it actually takes a bit of time for that to complete, right? Uh, at the same time, you can go into your um, log source management, right, to take a look at what are the log sources, the services that has been indexed, right? That gives you an indication that the logs are coming in and they should be indexed, right? If you are seeing traffic in those fields, right? Okay, what I'm going to do next is to show you a simulation. I have a sandbox in the cloud that I use for my testing, right? Whether it's malware detonation or just to understand how the malware behave in the network environment. So in this machine, I've downloaded a sample malware. What I'm going to do is just to open up the zip file, right? And what M for endpoint will do is that because it's a malicious executable file that we are trying to unzip, it will detect that it's malicious and then quarantine the file, right? And with that, it will actually trigger an event to be sent to QRadar, right? So we just want to make sure that our configuration is done correctly and the traffic is being sent to QRadar. Okay, next, let's go back to the QRadar console. And under log activity, you will see that we have received the logs, right, from the log source demo M. Let's filter out, and you can see that we have a threat detected and a threat quarantine being um, received or pulled in by QRadar itself. Thank you very much for watching this video and stay tuned for the next video, right? There are a few things that if you notice in this video that I have not shown or tweaked, right? I'll do it in my next video as this video has gone longer than I expected, right? If you like the video, please click on like and give me your comments, right, on the areas that you might not be clear so that I can actually, you know, update the video to basically include anything that I might have accidentally edited off, right? And more importantly, if there is a need and a demand, I might write the step-by-step guide into the web page, right? So that it's easier to look at it from a web perspective or from, a written document perspective versus trying to catch up and follow through the video. Thank you very much and stay safe.